The cards hit the table with a slap that echoed through the smoky saloon. And with that sound, Catherine Monroe's entire world shattered into pieces she could never put back together. Her brother James stumbled through the door of their small cabin on the outskirts of Dodge City, Kansas, just past midnight on a sweltering August evening in 1878. Catherine had been mending her only good dress by candlelight, waiting up despite the late hour, worry gnawing at her stomach like it had every night for the past 3 months. Ever since their father died from pneumonia that brutal winter, James had changed. The responsible older brother who had taught her to ride horses and read books had disappeared, replaced by a desperate man who spent every evening at the poker tables convinced his next hand would solve all their problems. Catherine. His voice cracked, and when she looked up, she saw tears streaming down his dirt-streaked face. At 24, James looked a decade older, his eyes hollow and frightened. Catherine, I'm so sorry. I'm so damn sorry. She set down her needle, her hands beginning to tremble. What did you do? I owed Dalton Pierce $500. I thought I could win it back tonight. I swear I thought I had the cards, but I lost everything we had left. He collapsed onto the wooden chair, his head in his hands. He said he'd kill me. He said he'd burn down this cabin with both of us in it unless I paid him by morning. $500 might as well have been $5,000. They barely had 50 cents between them. Catherine felt the blood drain from her face, her mind racing through impossible solutions. We'll leave. We'll pack up and go, head to California or Oregon, somewhere he cannot find us. He has men watching the roads. He knew I'd try to run. James looked up at her then, and the expression on his face made her blood turn to ice. He offered me a way out. One way to clear the debt entirely. She knew before he said it. She knew from the guilt written across every line of his face, from the way he could not meet her eyes. No. Catherine, please, you have to understand. He's going to sell you to a brothel in Abilene regardless if I agree or not. At least this way, the debt is cleared, and I can make something of myself, earn enough to buy you back eventually. You sold me. The words came out flat, emotionless, because her mind could not yet process the enormity of what he was saying. Your own sister. You sold me like a horse or a piece of furniture. It's not like that. Dalton said he has a buyer, someone respectable looking for a wife. You'll be married, Catherine, not sent to some brothel. You'll have a good life, better than I could ever give you here. He reached for her hand, but she jerked away, standing so quickly her chair toppled backward. When? Tomorrow, noon, at Dalton's office above the saloon. James was crying openly now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I had no choice. You had a choice. You chose cards over your sister. You chose your own miserable life over mine. Catherine's voice remained eerily calm, though inside she was screaming. Get out! Catherine, please! Get out of this house. You are no longer my brother. Whatever happens to me now, you will live with that knowledge every day for the rest of your life. James left, his shoulders shaking with sobs, and Catherine stood alone in the cabin that had been her home for all 22 years of her life. She did not cry. She could not afford tears now. Instead, she spent the long night packing her few possessions into a worn carpet bag, trying not to think about what tomorrow would bring, trying not to imagine the kind of man who would buy a woman like livestock. Morning came too quickly. Catherine dressed in her best dress, the blue cotton one her mother had made before she died, giving birth to a stillborn baby when Catherine was 15. She braided her long auburn hair, pinned it up properly, and looked at herself in the cracked mirror. Green eyes stared back at her, wide with fear she refused to acknowledge. She was tall for a woman, nearly 5 feet 8 inches, with a smattering of freckles across her nose that she had never been able to fade. Her mother used to say she was beautiful, but Catherine had never believed it. She was too tall, too thin, too plain. At 1:45 she walked into town, her head held high despite the curious stares from neighbors who somehow already knew her shame. News traveled fast in Dodge City. By evening, everyone would be whispering about poor Catherine Monroe sold by her gambling-addicted brother to pay his debts. Dalton Pierce's office smelled of cigar smoke and whiskey. The man himself sat behind a large oak desk, his substantial belly straining against his vest, gold rings glinting on his thick fingers. He smiled when Catherine entered, showing tobacco-stained teeth. "Right on time. I appreciate punctuality in a woman." "Where is he?" Catherine asked, refusing to sit in the chair Dalton indicated. "Where is the man who thinks he can buy a human being?" Now, no need for that tone. This is a business transaction, all legal and proper. Judge Whitmore is downstairs ready to perform the ceremony. Your buyer is a rancher from outside town, owns a substantial spread about 15 miles west. He's been looking for a wife, put out inquiries through proper channels, and when I mentioned your situation, he agreed to clear your brother's debt in exchange for your hand in marriage. It's all very civilized. Slavery is not civilized, no matter how you dress it up in legal words. You got spirit, that's good. He'll appreciate that. Dalton pulled out a thick envelope from his desk drawer. He's waiting at the church. Insisted on meeting you there rather than here. Said something about wanting to do this proper with God watching. Sentimental for a cowboy, but his money's as good as anyone's. The church was a small whitewashed building at the end of Main Street. Catherine walked there alone, Dalton having gone ahead to prepare the groom, whatever that meant. Each step felt like walking toward her own execution. She thought about running, just hiking up her skirts and running until her legs gave out, but where would she go? She had no money, no family besides James, who had already betrayed her, no friends with means to help. In 1878 Kansas, a woman alone was as good as dead. The church door stood open. Catherine stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dimmer light. Judge Whitmore stood at the altar, his Bible open, looking uncomfortable. Dalton Pierce lounged in a front pew, that infuriating smile still on his face. And standing with his back to her, studying the simple wooden cross on the wall, was a tall man in a dark suit. He turned when he heard her footsteps. Catherine's first thought was that he was young, perhaps only a handful of years older than herself. Her second thought was that he looked as unhappy about this arrangement as she felt. He had dark hair that needed cutting, sun-bronzed skin that spoke of years working outdoors, and eyes the color of storm clouds. His jaw was set in a hard line, his broad shoulders tense beneath his suit jacket. He was handsome in a rugged, rough-edged way that might have made her heart flutter under different circumstances. "Miss Monroe." His voice was deep, quiet, with an accent she could not quite place. "My name is Thomas Garrett. I want you to know before we proceed that you have a choice." She blinked, certain she had misheard. "Excuse me?" Dalton stood up, his smile fading. "Now wait just a minute, Garrett. We had an agreement." Thomas ignored him, his gray eyes fixed on Catherine. "I paid your brother's debt this morning. $500 delivered to Mr. Pierce here at dawn. The debt is cleared. You are not obligated to marry me or anyone else." Catherine's mind reeled. "I do not understand." "My ranch needs help. I've been working it alone for 3 years since my father died, and it's more than one man can handle. I put out word that I was looking for a wife, someone willing to work hard in exchange for a home and a share in the ranch. When Pierce told me about your situation, it made me sick to my stomach, but I saw an opportunity to help." He took a step closer, his expression earnest. "If you marry me, you'll work as my partner on the ranch. You'll have your own room, your own space, and I will not touch you or make any demands of you beyond honest labor. If you decide after a time that you want to leave, I'll give you enough money to start over somewhere else. But you do not have to marry me. The debt is paid regardless. You are free." "That was not our arrangement." Dalton's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. "You paid for a wife, Garrett." "I paid to free a woman from slavery, Pierce. There's a difference." Thomas's hand moved to rest on the gun at his hip, a casual gesture that nonetheless carried weight. "I suggest you leave now. Our business is concluded." Dalton looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Thomas's steady gaze made him reconsider. He stormed out of the church, muttering curses. Judge Whitmore cleared his throat awkwardly. "Should I stay or—" "Give us a moment, please, Judge," Thomas said, not taking his eyes off Catherine. When they were alone, Catherine found her voice. "Why would you do this? You do not know me? I could be lazy or mean or completely incompetent at ranch work. Could be. But I saw you walk through town with your head up, knowing everyone was staring and judging, and you did not flinch. That takes courage. I respect courage." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "My mother was sold to a brothel when I was 10 years old. We were living in St. Louis. My father had just died, and she had no way to pay our debts. I never saw her again. When Pierce told me about you, I saw a chance to give someone else the choice my mother never had." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes for the first time since James had stumbled home with his terrible confession. "I'm sorry about your mother." "Me too." Thomas rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "Look, I know this is strange. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I'm offering you something genuine. A place to live, honest work, and respect. I'm not asking you to love me or even like me. I'm just asking if you want a chance to start over." She should have been more cautious. She should have asked 100 questions, demanded assurances, investigated this stranger's background. But standing in that church, looking into Thomas Garrett's honest gray eyes, Catherine felt something shift inside her. He had paid for her freedom, expecting nothing in return. In a world where her own brother had sold her without hesitation, here was a stranger offering her a choice. "What kind of work would I be doing?" A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Cooking, cleaning, mending, helping with the horses and cattle when needed. I have about 200 head of cattle and a dozen horses. The house needs a woman's touch, I will not lie. I'm not much for domestic organization, but it's solid, has a good roof and a well that never runs dry. The ranch is called the Silver Creek Ranch, about 15 miles west of here. Beautiful country." "And you truly expect nothing else from me?" "I expect hard work and honesty. That's all." He held out his hand. "Do we have a deal, Miss Monroe?" Catherine looked at his outstretched hand, calloused, scarred, the hand of a man who knew hard labor, a hand offering her something she had never expected to have again after last night, a future. She took it. "We have a deal, Mr. Garrett, and under the circumstances you may call me Catherine." "Thomas." His handshake was firm, warm. "Should we make it legal then? The marriage would protect you better than just my word. Give you rights to the ranch if something happens to me, but it's your choice." Catherine thought about it. A legal marriage would indeed protect her, give her status as a wife rather than a hired woman. In this time and place, a wife had more security than a single woman, even if the marriage was one of convenience. "Yes, let us make it legal." Judge Whitmore performed the ceremony quickly, clearly uncomfortable with the entire situation. Thomas produced a simple gold band that he said had been his grandmother's, and when he slipped it onto Catherine's finger, she felt the weight of it like a promise. They signed the papers the judge witnessed, and just like that, Catherine Monroe became Catherine Garrett. Thomas had a wagon waiting outside the church, pulled by 2 sturdy bay horses. He helped Catherine up onto the seat with careful, respectful hands, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they rolled out of Dodge City, Catherine looked back once at the town where she had spent her entire life. She did not see James anywhere in the dusty streets, and she was grateful. She did not know if she could forgive him, did not know if the wound he had inflicted would ever truly heal. "You will never have to see him again if you do not want to," Thomas said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "I know he's your brother, but what he did was unforgivable in my book. He used to be different. Before my father died, before the gambling took hold, he used to protect me." Catherine twisted the gold ring on her finger. "I keep trying to find that person in my memory, to hold on to who he was, but all I can see is the man who sold me to save himself." Grief does strange things to people. It's not an excuse, but maybe an explanation. Thomas guided the horses onto a dirt road leading west. My father drank himself to death after my mother was taken. He just gave up on living. I was 14 when he died, left alone on a failing ranch. I hated him for a long time for leaving me like that. But not anymore. Now I just feel sad. Sad that he could not find a reason to keep going. Sad for all the years we could have had together. He glanced at her. I'm not saying you have to forgive your brother. I'm just saying that hate is a heavy thing to carry, and you have already carried too much. They rode in comfortable silence for a while. The Kansas prairie stretched out around them, golden grass rippling in the wind like waves on an ocean. The August sun beat down mercilessly, but a breeze kept the worst of the heat at bay. Catherine found herself studying Thomas from the corner of her eye. He sat easy in the wagon seat, confident and relaxed, one hand loosely holding the reins. He had removed his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle. There was a scar on his left hand, a white line running from his wrist to his knuckles. How old are you? She asked suddenly. 27. You? 22. And you have been running this ranch alone since you were 14? More or less. Had some help from neighbors at first, learned as I went, made a lot of mistakes, lost money and cattle, nearly lost the ranch itself more than once, but I'm stubborn. That small smile appeared again. Silver Creek is all I have. It's my home, my future. Everything I do is for that ranch. It must be lonely, he shrugged. Sometimes, but I've got the horses and the cattle. They're not much for conversation, but they are dependable. Catherine found herself smiling despite everything. There was something appealing about Thomas's dry humor, his quiet strength. She had expected someone cruel or callous, a man who would see her as property he had purchased. Instead, she found a young man carrying his own burdens, offering her a partnership rather than ownership. The Silver Creek Ranch appeared as they crested a low hill. Catherine caught her breath at the sight. A wide creek glittered in the sunlight, lined with cottonwood trees that provided blessed shade. The ranch house was a sturdy two-story structure built from logs and stone, with a wide porch and real glass windows. A barn stood nearby, freshly painted red, along with several corrals and outbuildings. Cattle grazed in the distance, and horses lifted their heads curiously as the wagon approached. It's beautiful, Catherine breathed. Thomas looked pleased. My father and I built most of it together before he died. I've added on since then, improved the barn, expanded the pastures. The house has 4 bedrooms upstairs, a good kitchen, a parlor. The master bedroom was my parents', but I have been using one of the smaller rooms. I thought you might want the master bedroom for yourself. Where will you sleep? One of the other rooms. I told you, Catherine, you will have your own space. He pulled the wagon up in front of the house and hopped down, then came around to help her. His hands on her waist were impersonal, steadying, and he released her the moment her feet touched the ground. Inside, the house was as he had described it, though calling it messy would have been kind. Dishes were piled in the kitchen, dust covered every surface, and clothes were strewn haphazardly over chairs in the back of the sofa. Thomas had the grace to look embarrassed. I said it needed a woman's touch. That might have been an understatement. Catherine surveyed the chaos and felt something unexpected. Purpose. For months since her father's death, she had been adrift, caring for James in the cabin while her brother slowly destroyed himself with gambling. She had felt helpless, useless. Now, looking at this beautiful house that just needed care and attention, she felt needed. It will take some work, but nothing I cannot handle. Show me the kitchen properly. They spent the afternoon with Thomas, giving her a tour of the ranch. He showed her where everything was kept, how the stove worked, where the well was located. He introduced her to the horses, each by name, and Catherine was charmed by how gentle he was with the animals. He had a way of speaking to them that was soft and reassuring, and they clearly trusted him. That's Sage. She's the oldest mare, about 15. Good-tempered, perfect for learning if you do not know how to ride. He stroked the horse's nose affectionately. Next to her is Thunder. He's young and spirited, needs an experienced hand. Then there is Willow. She is Sage's daughter, just as sweet as her mother. I can ride, actually. My father taught me when I was young, though I have not had much opportunity lately. Catherine reached out tentatively to pet Sage, and the mare nickered softly, nosing at her palm. We had to sell our horses after Father died. Well, Sage is yours now if you want her. It will be easier to get around the ranch if you can ride. Thomas moved to the next stall. This troublemaker is Duke. He's my primary mount. Stubborn as the come, but loyal. By the time the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Catherine felt overwhelmed but oddly hopeful. Thomas showed her to the master bedroom, carrying her carpet bag up the stairs. The room was spacious, with a large bed covered in a faded quilt, a wardrobe, a washstand, and best of all, windows that looked out over the creek. I will bring up water so you can wash, Thomas said, lingering in the doorway, and I will make something for dinner. Fair warning, I'm a terrible cook. You will probably want to take over kitchen duties starting tomorrow if you value your digestion. Thank you, Thomas, for all of this, for giving me a choice when no one else would. Catherine met his eyes, wanting him to understand how much his actions meant. He looked uncomfortable with her gratitude. You do not have to thank me for basic human decency, Catherine. Get some rest. Tomorrow we will start figuring out how to make this partnership work. That night, lying in a strange bed in a strange house, Catherine should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something that might have been peace. Through the open window, she could hear the creek babbling, night insects singing, and the distant lowing of cattle. The sheets smelled of sunshine and fresh air. The ring on her finger caught the moonlight. She was married to a stranger living on a ranch miles from anywhere, with no idea what the future held. But for the first time in months, she felt like she had a chance at building something good. Thomas Garrett had freed her, not just from Dalton Pierce's scheme, but from the helplessness that had been suffocating her since her father's death. Tomorrow she would start her new life. Tonight she would rest. The next weeks fell into a rhythm. Catherine woke before dawn and started breakfast while Thomas handled the early morning chores. She discovered he had not been exaggerating about his cooking skills. The eggs he had prepared that first night had been simultaneously burned and undercooked. Taking over the kitchen was not just helpful, it was survival. She threw herself into making the house a home. She cleaned every room thoroughly, organized the chaos, mended the torn curtains, and even planted a small vegetable garden near the kitchen door. Thomas watched her work with something like wonder, as if he could not quite believe this was happening. They worked side by side most days. Catherine helped with the horses, learning their individual personalities and quirks. She assisted with mending fences, feeding cattle, and the 1,000 small tasks that went into running a ranch. The work was hard, physically demanding in a way she had never experienced, but she found she did not mind. There was satisfaction in ending each day exhausted, knowing she had accomplished something tangible. Thomas was an easy partner to work with. He was patient when teaching her ranch skills, never condescending or cruel when she made mistakes. He had a quiet sense of humor that emerged at unexpected moments, making her laugh when she was frustrated or tired. He was respectful of her space, never entering her room without permission, never standing too close or making her uncomfortable. But Catherine found herself noticing things about him. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how he hummed tunelessly while he worked. Always the same melody that she suspected he did not even realize he was making. The careful way he handled injured animals, his big hands surprisingly gentle. The fact that he always saved the best portions of food for her, claiming he was not that hungry, even when she knew he had been working since dawn. One evening in early September, about 3 weeks after she had arrived, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. It had become a habit, this quiet time after dinner, when the day's work was done. Thomas whittled a piece of wood while Catherine mended one of his shirts, the silence between them comfortable. "You have been happy here?" Thomas asked suddenly, not looking up from his whittling. "I have." "Why do you ask?" "Just checking. making sure this arrangement is working for you. You're free to leave anytime like I promised." He said it casually, but Catherine heard the tension beneath the words. "Do you want me to leave?" "No." He looked up quickly, then seemed embarrassed by his vehemence. "No, I want you to stay, if you want to stay. The ranch is better with you here. I'm better with you here." Catherine set down her mending, her heart beating faster. "I want to stay, Thomas. I feel more at home here after 3 weeks than I ever did in Dodge City." He smiled, real and warm. "Good. That's good." They sat in silence a while longer, but something had shifted. The air between them felt charged, full of possibility. The first frost came in late October. Catherine woke to find the world transformed, every surface glittering with ice crystals. She dressed warmly and went downstairs to find Thomas already stoking the fire in the main room, trying to get the house warm. "Morning," he greeted her, his breath visible in the cold air. "Winter came early this year. We will need to bring the horses into the barn, make sure all the cattle are accounted for." They worked all morning in the biting cold. By noon, Catherine's fingers were numb despite her gloves, and her nose felt like it might fall off. Thomas noticed her shivering and insisted she go inside to warm up while he finished the outdoor chores. "I can help," she protested. "I am not fragile." "I know you are not, but there's no point in both of us freezing. Go make coffee, something hot. I will be in soon." Catherine went inside reluctantly and busied herself making coffee and heating soup. When Thomas finally came in an hour later, his lips were blue, and he was shaking so hard he could barely hold his coffee cup. Without thinking, Catherine took his hands in hers, chafing them to restore circulation. "You should have come in sooner," she scolded. "You will catch your death." "Had to make sure the animals were secure," his teeth chattered. "They depend on me." "They depend on us," Catherine corrected, "and we cannot take care of them if we make ourselves sick." She made him sit by the fire, wrapped him in blankets, and brought him hot soup. As the color slowly returned to his face, he looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "You are taking care of me." "Of course I am. We are partners, are we not? Partners take care of each other." "Partners," he repeated softly. "Yes, partners." But the way he said it made Catherine think he was considering a different word entirely. That night, a blizzard rolled in. The wind howled around the house, rattling the windows and piling snow against the doors. Catherine lay in bed listening to the storm and worrying about the animals, about the ranch, about Thomas in his room down the hall. Around midnight, she heard footsteps in the hallway and sat up, concerned. A soft knock on her door. "Catherine, are you awake?" She wrapped a shawl around her nightgown and opened the door. Thomas stood there in his undershirt and trousers, looking sheepish. "Sorry to disturb you. I wanted to check that your room was warm enough. The wind is fierce on this side of the house." "It's cold, but I am managing. Is your room all right?" "Fine, He hesitated. "I wanted to make sure you were not scared. The first blizzard can be frightening if you're not used to them." Catherine smiled, touched by his concern. "I am not scared. Concerned about the animals, perhaps, but not scared." "The animals will be fine. The barn is solid, and they have plenty of feed." He still lingered in the doorway, as if reluctant to leave. "Catherine, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever regret it? Marrying me, coming here?" His voice was low, almost lost in the howl of the wind. "Do you ever wish you had taken the money and left?" Catherine moved closer, near enough to see his face clearly in the dim light from her lamp. "Not once. Not for a single moment, Thomas. You gave me back my life. Why would I regret that?" "Because you are stuck here with me miles from anywhere. Working yourself to exhaustion every day, you could have had a different life. Maybe met someone you actually wanted to marry." "I wanted to marry you," Catherine said quietly. The words were out before she could stop them, but she found she did not want to take them back. "Maybe not that first day when everything was confusion and fear, but I want to be married to you now. I want to be here on this ranch, building this life with you." Thomas stared at her, his gray eyes wide. "Catherine, I'm not asking anything of you, she said quickly. I know our arrangement. I know the rules. I just wanted you to know that I do not regret this. I could never regret this. He reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek, warm against her cold skin. I need to tell you something. The truth of why I really brought you here. Catherine's heart hammered in her chest. What truth? When Pierce told me about you, about what your brother had done, I was angry, furious. I wanted to help, wanted to free you from that situation. But then I saw you in the church. And Catherine, you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, brave and proud and strong. And I realized I did not just want to save you. I wanted to know you. I wanted a chance to earn your trust, your friendship, maybe someday something more. He took a shaky breath. I told you that you were free to leave, and you are, but God help me, I hope you never do, because I have fallen in love with you, Catherine, completely, irrevocably in love with you. Catherine felt tears spring to her eyes. You love me? How could I not? You took this broken-down ranch and made it a home. You work harder than any person I have ever known. You laugh at my terrible jokes and sing while you cook and talk to the horses like they are your friends. You are everything I never knew I needed. He cupped her face in both hands, his touch reverent. I love you. I am sorry if that makes things complicated. Thomas. She covered his hands with hers. It does not make things complicated. It makes them simple. Because I love you too. For a moment he just stared at her as if he could not believe what he was hearing. Then he smiled. That rare, beautiful smile that transformed his whole face, and he kissed her. It was gentle at first, almost tentative, but when Catherine wrapped her arms around his neck and pulled him closer, the kiss deepened into something that made her forget about the blizzard, the cold, everything except the feeling of being in his arms. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. Marry me again, Catherine laughed. We are already married. I know, but that first time was not real. It was a legal arrangement, a business deal. I want to marry you properly, with both of us choosing it freely. I want to stand up in front of everyone we know and tell them that you are my wife because you want to be, not because circumstances forced you into it. Yes, Catherine whispered. Yes, I will marry you again, as many times as you want. He kissed her again, and this time when he pulled back, he looked uncertain. Catherine, our arrangement, the separate rooms. If you want to keep things that way, I understand. I will not pressure you. Catherine took his hand and led him into her room, closing the door behind them. I think our arrangement might need some adjusting. Thomas's laugh was low and warm, and when he pulled her close again, Catherine felt like she was exactly where she belonged. They married again in December, a small ceremony in the same church where they had first wed. This time, Catherine wore a new dress that Thomas had insisted on buying, pale green wool that matched her eyes. Thomas wore his best suit, the same one from their first wedding, but he looked different now, happier, more at ease. The few neighbors they had invited watched with knowing smiles as Thomas and Catherine exchanged vows they had written themselves. When the judge pronounced them married for the second time, Thomas kissed his wife with a passion that made several guests chuckle and whistle. Afterwards, they held a small celebration at the ranch. Catherine had spent days preparing food, and Thomas had cleaned the house until it shone. Their neighbors brought gifts and good wishes, and for one perfect afternoon the house was full of laughter and music and joy. As the sun set and their guests departed, Thomas pulled Catherine into his arms on their front porch. Happy, Mrs. Garrett? Happier than I ever thought possible, Mr. Garrett. He nuzzled her neck. Think we should go upstairs and celebrate properly? Catherine laughed, swatting his chest. Insatiable. Only for you. He swept her up in his arms, making her shriek with surprise, and carried her into the house. The winter was harsh that year, but inside the ranch house, Catherine and Thomas were warm. They worked during the day and held each other at night. Learning the rhythms of marriage, the give and take of two lives becoming one. They argued sometimes, usually about whose turn it was to handle the least pleasant chores, but the arguments never lasted long and often ended with laughter or kisses or both. Spring came with a riot of wildflowers covering the prairie. Catherine discovered she was pregnant in late March, and Thomas's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy, then immediately set her down and fretted that he might have hurt the baby. "Thomas, I am pregnant, not made of glass," she said, amused by his sudden caution. I know, but you are carrying my child, our child, that is precious cargo." He knelt down and pressed a kiss to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I promise to do everything in my power to give you a good life." Catherine ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed with love for this man who had saved her and then shown her what it meant to be truly cherished. Their son was born in November of 1879, a healthy baby with his father's gray eyes and his mother's auburn hair. They named him Samuel after Thomas's father, and Thomas cried when he held his son for the first time. "I promise to be better than my father was," he whispered to the sleeping infant. "I promise to never give up, never leave you. You will always have me." "You will always have both of us," Catherine corrected gently, reaching up to wipe the tears from her husband's face. Motherhood was harder than Catherine had anticipated. Samuel was a fussy baby who did not sleep well, and Catherine often found herself exhausted, struggling to manage the baby and the household and the ranch work. Thomas stepped up without hesitation, walking the floor with their son at night so Catherine could rest, taking over more of the household chores, bringing her tea and encouragement when she felt overwhelmed. "I could not do this without you," she told him one night, watching him soothe Samuel with practiced ease. "You will never have to. We are in this together, remember? Partners." He looked up at her with those gray eyes that still made her heart skip. "I love you, Catherine. You and this little troublemaker are my whole world." As Samuel grew from an infant into a toddler, Catherine and Thomas's love deepened into something even stronger than passion. They had the easy affection of couples who had weathered storms together, who knew each other's moods and quirks, who could communicate with a glance across a crowded room. The ranch prospered. With Catherine's help, Thomas was able to expand their herd, improve their breeding stock, and build a reputation for quality cattle and horses. They hired a young man named Jacob to help with the heavy labor, giving Thomas more time to spend with his family. 2 years after Samuel was born, Catherine gave birth to a daughter they named Rose. She was a placid baby, the opposite of her brother, and Thomas doted on her shamelessly. Catherine would often find him in the nursery at odd hours, just watching their daughter sleep with an expression of absolute wonder. "What are you thinking about, Shushual?" she asked him one evening, joining him in the nursery where he sat beside Rose's cradle. "About how different my life could have been. If Pierce had not told me about you, if I had not gone to that church, if you had chosen to leave." He looked up at her. "I think about the man I was before you, lonely and bitter and convinced I would always be alone. And then I think about the man I am now with you and Samuel and Rose, and I cannot believe my luck. It was not luck. You chose to be kind when you could have been cruel. You chose to offer freedom instead of ownership. Everything we have built came from that choice." Catherine sat on the floor beside his chair, leaning her head against his knee. "I love you, Thomas Garrett. Thank you for buying my freedom all those years ago." "I did not buy your freedom, Catherine. I bought your brother's debt. You freed yourself by choosing to stay, by choosing to build this life with me." He stroked her hair gently. "But you are welcome anyway." The years flowed by like the creek that gave their ranch its name, constant and nourishing. Samuel grew into a serious boy who loved the horses and followed his father everywhere. Rose was her mother's shadow, learning to cook and garden and manage a household. In 1884, they had another son, James, Named after Catherine's brother in a gesture of forgiveness that Thomas had encouraged, Catherine had reconciled with James a few years after Samuel's birth. Her brother had written her a letter, pages and pages of apology and regret, explaining that he had left Dodge City and gone to California, where he had gotten sober and found work as a clerk. He had married a woman named Sarah, and they were trying to build a good life. He did not ask for forgiveness, but he wanted Catherine to know that not a day went by when he did not regret what he had done. Thomas had urged her to respond. Forgiveness is not about saying what he did was okay. It is about freeing yourself from the anger and pain. You do not have to have a relationship with him if you do not want to, but maybe giving him a chance to make amends will help you both heal. Catherine had written back a short letter saying that while she could not forget what had happened, she was willing to forgive and move forward. Over the years, she and James exchanged occasional letters, and when he came to visit in 1886, bringing his wife and 2 children, Catherine found that the old wound had finally healed. James had changed, sobered by his mistakes, devoted to his family, and determined to live honestly. Watching him play with Samuel, Rose, and little James, Catherine felt the last of her anger fade away. "You were right," she told Thomas that night after James and his family had gone to bed in the guest rooms. Forgiving him did not mean forgetting. It meant letting go of the hurt so I could move forward. "I am glad." Thomas pulled her close. "Everyone deserves a chance at redemption. Look at me. I was a bitter, lonely cowboy convinced I would die alone on this ranch. Then you came along and redeemed me." "I did not redeem you. I just loved you." "Same thing." He kissed her softly. Love is always redemption. By 1890, the Silver Creek Ranch was one of the most successful in the county. Thomas and Catherine had built a thriving business through hard work, smart decisions, and unwavering partnership. Samuel, now 11, was already talking about the improvements he would make when he took over the ranch someday. Rose, at 8, had started a successful egg and vegetable business, selling to neighbors and in town. Little James, at 6, was the family's resident troublemaker, always getting into mischief, but impossible to stay mad at. Catherine stood on the porch one evening in late summer, watching her children play in the yard while Thomas brought in the horses for the night. She was 44 now and Thomas 47, but she felt like the luckiest woman alive. The girl who had been sold to pay her brother's debts had become a successful rancher, a loving wife, a devoted mother. She had a home, a family, a purpose. Thomas joined her on the porch, sliding an arm around her waist and pulling her against his side. "What are you thinking about?" "About that day in the church, about how terrified I was, how certain that my life was over." She looked up at him. "About how you gave me a choice when no one else would, and how that choice led to all of this." "Best $500 I ever spent." He grinned at her indignant expression. "I am joking. You know you are priceless." Terrible flirt, but she was smiling. "Only with my wife." He kissed her temple. "Have I told you lately that I love you?" "Not for at least 2 hours. I was starting to worry." "Cannot have that." He turned her in his arms, looking into her eyes with all the love and devotion he had shown her for 12 years. "I love you, Catherine Garrett. You are my heart, my home, my everything. I thank God every day that you walked into that church and gave me a chance to prove I was worth your trust. You proved that the moment you told me I was free. Everything after has just been confirmation." She stood on her toes to kiss him properly. "I love you, Thomas. Thank you for saving me." "We saved each other," he murmured against her lips. And watching their children play as the sun set over the prairie, Catherine knew he was right. They had saved each other, and together they had built something beautiful and lasting. She had been sold like property, but she had found freedom, love, and a home. She had been broken, but she had healed. She had been alone, but now she was surrounded by family. The girl who had lost everything had found so much more than she ever dreamed possible. And every day for the rest of her life, Catherine Garrett would be grateful for the cowboy who bought her freedom and offered his name, his heart, and his future. Years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and celebrations. The children grew, the ranch expanded, and Catherine and Thomas grew old together with the kind of contentment that comes from a life well lived. They added another bedroom to the house, then another barn. They survived droughts and harsh winters, celebrated good harvests and the birth of grandchildren. Samuel married at 23, bringing home a spirited young woman named Elizabeth who fit perfectly into the family. Rose shocked everyone by announcing she wanted to go to teacher's college, and Thomas and Catherine supported her dream wholeheartedly, proud of their daughter's ambition. James took over much of the day-to-day ranch operations as Thomas's joints began to ache with age, showing a natural talent for the work. In 1899, Thomas and Catherine celebrated their 21st anniversary, the children throwing them a party that brought neighbors from miles around. Catherine wore the gold band Thomas had given her that first day, now worn smooth with years of wear, and Thomas held her close as they danced to fiddle music under the stars. 21 years, he mused. Feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. I know what you mean. Sometimes I still see that scared girl I was walking into the church not knowing what would happen. Then I look around at all of this, at our family and our home, and I can barely remember her. I remember her. I remember thinking she was the bravest person I had ever met. Thomas twirled her gently, and I was right. You took a terrible situation and turned it into something beautiful. That takes courage. We did it together, Catherine insisted. I could not have built this life alone. Neither could I. That is the secret, I think, finding someone who makes you better, who works beside you instead of against you. Finding a true partner. He pulled her closer. I could not have asked for a better partner than you, Catherine. She rested her head on his shoulder, swaying to the music. Surrounded by their children and grandchildren and friends, this was happiness. This was home. This was the life she had built from the ashes of her darkest moment, and it was more than she had ever dreamed possible. As the years moved into the new century, Thomas's health began to decline. The years of hard labor had taken their toll, and though his spirit remained strong, his body grew weaker. Catherine nursed him through bouts of pneumonia and the aches and pains that came with age, never complaining, always steady by his side. One evening in the spring of 1905, Thomas called his family together. At 72, he looked every one of his years. His dark hair turned silver, his face lined with age, but his gray eyes were still sharp, still filled with love when they landed on Catherine. I want you all to know, he said, his voice rougher than it used to be but still strong, that I have lived a good life. A better life than I ever expected or deserved. Your mother gave me that gift. She took a chance on a lonely cowboy with more hope than sense, and she built a home and a family that have been my greatest joy. Father, please, Rose said, tears in her eyes. You are not going anywhere. Not yet, hopefully, but I am getting old, and I want to make sure you all know what you mean to me while I still can. He reached for Catherine's hand. Samuel, you have grown into a fine man and an excellent rancher. This land is in good hands with you. Rose, you are the smartest woman I know, and I'm so proud of everything you have accomplished. James, your mother and I are so grateful that we named you after her brother because you share his best qualities without his demons. You are all the legacy I could hope for. He turned to Catherine then, his eyes suspiciously bright. And you, my love, my wife, my partner, you have been my everything for 27 years. I thank you for choosing me, for staying, for building this beautiful life with me. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. Catherine was crying openly now. Do not talk like this is goodbye. I am not ready to let you go. I am not going anywhere just yet. But when my time comes, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you will be happy. Promise me you will enjoy the life we built. Watch our grandchildren grow. Take pride in everything we accomplished together. Do not mourn me forever, Catherine. Celebrate what we had. I promise, she whispered, but you have to promise me something too. Promise me you will fight to stay with me as long as you can. I am not done with you yet, Thomas Garrett." He smiled, that beautiful smile she had fallen in love with. Deal. Thomas lived another 3 years, long enough to see 2 more grandchildren born, to watch Samuel expand the ranch even further, to dance with Catherine at Rose's wedding when she finally married a fellow teacher she had fallen in love with. He died peacefully in his sleep in the summer of 1908, holding Catherine's hand, surrounded by the family they had built together. Catherine grieved, as anyone would grieve the loss of their great love, but she also celebrated as Thomas had asked her to. She threw herself into helping with the grandchildren, teaching them to cook and ride and love the land as she and Thomas had. She managed the ranch's accounts, advised Samuel on business decisions, and remained the heart of the family Thomas had started when he offered freedom to a frightened girl all those years ago. On quiet evenings, she would sit on the porch and remember. She remembered the terror of being sold, the shock of Thomas's offer, the slow building of trust that turned into friendship and then love. She remembered learning to work the ranch, the birth of each child, every triumph and setback they had faced together. She remembered his laugh, his touch, the way he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world, and she would touch the gold ring on her finger, worn thin now but still there, still symbolizing the promise they had made to each other, the promise of partnership, of love, of a life built together despite impossible beginnings. Catherine lived to be 83 years old, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren who had all been shaped by the love story that started in a small church in Dodge City, Kansas. She told them the story often, making sure they understood the lesson at its heart, that the worst moments of our lives can lead to the greatest blessings if we have the courage to choose hope over despair, love over bitterness. When she died peacefully in her sleep in 1917, her family laid her to rest beside Thomas on a hill overlooking Silver Creek Ranch. They placed a single headstone over both graves that read, "Thomas and Catherine Garrett, partners in life, love, and legacy." And if you visit Silver Creek Ranch today, now run by the 5th generation of Garretts, you will still hear the story of how it all began, how a cowboy bought a woman's freedom when he could have claimed ownership, how a frightened girl chose courage over fear, how 2 strangers became partners, then friends, then lovers, how they built a legacy that would last for generations, all because one man offered a choice and one woman was brave enough to take it. It was a love story for the ages, born in the dusty streets of the Old West, nurtured on the Kansas prairie, and remembered long after both lovers had passed into legend. A reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope and love can bloom, and that the choices we make in those moments define not just our lives, but the lives of everyone who comes after. The Silver Creek Ranch still stands, a testament to Catherine and Thomas's love, their partnership, and their unwavering belief that freedom, respect, and genuine partnership could build something that would last forever. And in the hearts of every Garrett who works that land, who rides those trails, who watches the sun set over the prairie, lives the memory of the cowboy who bought a woman's freedom and the woman who gave him her heart in return, building together a love story that would never be forgotten.